It's showtime, folks. Welcome back to the third in what will be a number of live readings of Bet On You, a book that I wrote, came out late last year, late 2021, and it's my self-help memoir of my journey of conquering drink and drugs and gambling and philandering and limiting beliefs and autoimmune disease, losing a truckload of weight, putting on a bunch of muscle, running ultra marathons, dating women, cheating on women. It's not funny. It's not funny. The story is funny, but the person that was hurt, that's not funny. And when we get to that chapter eventually, you'll know what I'm talking about. But I wonder if any of my ex-girlfriends have gotten their hands on a copy of this yet. I suspect I might find out if they have. So we're up to chapter 3, and I accidentally started reading this yesterday, but we're on the right path. So it's chapter 3 and 4 today. Chapter 3 is relatively short, and don't want to leave you hanging too much. So let's just get stuck into it, shall we? So chapter 3 is called The Dragon Chaser, and this follows on from the How to Hit Rock Bottom chapter. And for those that want to follow along, you can get this book on Amazon. It's available on Kindle immediately, or you can get it in a paperback version just like this. Or if you like to listen when you're running or gardening or whatever, it's available on Audible in my voice, which I recorded when I was in Germany last year, which was pretty cool. And that was a lot of fun. I highly recommend. Chapter 3, The Dragon Chaser. The fascinating part of my own degenerate gambling habits. When I did win, I'd immediately increase the size of the next bet to try and achieve the same euphoria as before. Recovered heroin addicts call this chasing the dragon. Except in my case, the dragon was a purebred horse. The first sliver of light entered my world after that first phone call with Mary. Mary arranged for me to meet with a gambling psychologist and attend one-on-one sessions run by the Salvation Army. It was free professional therapy, and thank Christ for that, because I had less assets than post-World War II Germany. And those sessions were funded by taxes collected from the gambling industry, so for the first time in my gambling career, I actually ended up in the black. Lee politely introduced herself, shook my hand, and sat down opposite me. She was a fully qualified, Richie-Didge, problem gambler-trained psychologist. And decades of taking on other people's problems were proudly exhibited across her deeply wrinkled forehead. She had a natural warmth that made me trust her immediately, yet I felt a tremendous guilt for placing another heavy burden across her brow. It became clear that Lee was living her purpose and the guilt soon passed. And these sessions were an opportunity for me to share for the first time in my life without judgment. So share I did. Lee started with one simple question about the relationship I had with my mum, and I immediately broke down. Tears and guttural weeping erupted forth. It's the kind of weeping you do when you're 17 and in love for the first time, when your forever breaks it off without explanation and immediately starts dating someone else. Or when your favourite grandparent dies and suddenly there are no more fishing trips. This must have been pent up for a very long while, as I felt immediate relief upon sharing. Similar to the feeling Nelson Mandela had after being released from incarceration after 27 long years. I say similar because I wasn't there. Now, I know what you're thinking. Laban, you're comparing your emotional release to the plight of the 20th century's greatest liberator of men, who was locked up for nearly 3 decades? Yes. Yes, I am. Well, not exactly. But in terms of my 27 years of metaphorical emotional jail time, you betcha. Being trapped in emotional pain is a prison sentence for a crime you didn't know you committed, and never realizing you've been locked up for it. So I chose to follow what Mandela did so beautifully. Use a negative experience as my new advantage, a blessing in disguise, if you will. What I like to call the gift of adversity. The gift of adversity mindset allows us to take back our power by using the experience to our advantage and not wallowing in the victimhood of what happened to us. We have very little actual control over what happens to us, but we absolutely have control over how we react to it. Laban's random lessons. Being in bondage to emotional pain was never a badge of honour. When preparing to break free, it's good to find ideas and resources to help keep you sane. Read them, mull them over, apply the principles at your own pace and in your own safe space. Here are a few that help me. Treat yourself like someone you really care about. Lifelong repressions of emotions caused a gradual loss of perspective. After years of dysfunction, my body adapted to the sustained pain, and my brain eventually gave up and backed off. It allowed me to survive, but never to thrive. Only time away from the pain allowed me to realise how destructive my feelings of defeat were. Relief offers a much-needed reference point. Facing Codependence by Pia Mellody was a brutally confronting book to read, but it probably saved my life. Special shout out to a friend of mine, Timmy O'Toole, for that recommendation. Now, that bit I said about having very little control over what happens to us, but we can control how we react, well, I'm not the only one that thinks that way, by the way. Charles R. Swindoll, for example, once said, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react. Chapter 4. Morgan Freeman and Mick Dundee. What does this chapter have in store with a chapter title like that? Morgan Freeman and Mick Dundee. My mum and dad met in the summer of 1977. Dad, aka Rick, was working as a fresh-faced midnight to dawn radio announcer, and Mum, aka Gail, was a talented hairdresser. My father was a handsome man back in the day, but his amazing radio voice was the real panty dropper. Imagine a mix of Morgan Freeman and Crocodile Dundee. That was my dad. They met after Mum rang up the radio station, slid her own sultry tongue through the phone receiver, and requested, "You sexy thing," by Hot Chocolate. Mum was a red-headed stunner, but easily fell into the danger zone on the crazy hot matrix. My father, oblivious to the impending danger and led only by his testosterone, was no match. The two struck up an intense romance, and within 3 short months, Dad had moved out of his shoebox and into Mum's house. She carried a young son from her first marriage, my older half-brother, which is probably an important point to mention. Mum and Dad were together 6 years before the chocolatey goodness turned bitter enough for them to do something about it, and they finally parted ways when I was just 3 years old. Most couples that break up pray for a civil split or conscious uncoupling. Unfortunately, on this occasion, it became a bloodied disembowelment. But these were just two people that were doing the best they could with the tools they had available at the time. It wasn't enough to keep them together, however. My father eventually found solace in the arms of his blonde-haired personal secretary. Insert penis and cliché hair. Dad's mistress was 3 months pregnant when he moved out for the final time. Talking about making your life complicated. After my first few sessions with Lee, the psychologist, I began to comprehend that what I experienced growing up, while prolific in society, wasn't normal, let alone functional. Society still does not completely understand the impact divorce has on children, but we do know it often leaves a trail of devastation one way or another. The day my parents split is one I remember well, even though for most of my life I struggled to recall anything from my infancy through my late teens. Modern psychology attributes memory loss to a coping mechanism our very clever brains utilise. Repressing memories might seem like a good idea at the time, but I'm still a much bigger fan of better out than in. A child's brain doesn't have this... I've got someone at the door. I don't think they're going to go away. And I can't speak Spanish well enough to tell them to come back later. Let's just persist. Oh my goodness, bear with me, folks. Hello? It's the DHL guy delivering something very important, no doubt. Welcome to Mexico, folks. A child's brain doesn't have the same extent of wiring that a fully developed adult brain has. So children will repress memories in lieu of having a full-blown mental breakdown if the trauma is too much. Not surprisingly, children's brains are ill-equipped to handle the same battering that our grown-up brains can. My youngest brother has no recollection of the split, perhaps given his age, but my older half-brother, who was 10 years old at the time, does. No stranger to this situation, he was about to experience his second lot of abandonment in only a few short years. Mum's first husband and his biological father abandoned him at a very young age. The effect on any child is brutal once, let alone twice. During Dad's final day with us, he and my mum were conferenced in their bedroom for what felt like an eternity. Their voices were muffled by inches of plasterboard and funky 1970s wallpaper. But it was very apparent this was no UN-led peace talk. The house vibrated with super low waves of negative energy. You could almost taste the impending doom with a modicum of intuition. But their furious negotiations eventually petered out, finishing with an eerie moment of silence before my father's bedraggled body appeared from around the corner. I jumped to attention and stood steadfast in front of my dad, just like Tank Man did in Tiananmen Square. And just like Tank Man, I wasn't going anywhere. Dad looked over at me, and his eyes lit up momentarily. Despite an ambitious smile, you could clearly see that he was desperately protecting a broken soul. Before I could say anything, he scooped me up, wrapped both arms around me and whispered, "Daddy has to go now." His Magnum PI-inspired moustache tickled my face. With a kiss on my flushed cheek, he was gone. And due to the laws around divorce in New Zealand in the early 1980s, the mother was almost always given the majority of custody, while the father was made out to be a pariah, whether deserved or not. Fortnightly, weekly visits were the only penance for a lucky father. An invisible punishment for allowing the family to be broken apart, perhaps. Having had the benefit of many years to reflect, I now get the reasons why my parents chose to split, and in many ways, I'm thankful that they did. I've spoken to countless individuals who were children of loveless marriages, including my own father, and 100% of the outcomes have been devastating to the children in one way, shape, or another. Studies repeatedly show that marriages that stay together on the whole are much better for everyone involved long term. Although I think we all know some relationships that would have concluded with an OJ and Nicole Simpson style ending, if not for the option of divorce. I can only imagine how miserable it must be for parents who chose to ignore the signals and stay locked together, fearful of what kids will say or do if they end the marriage. Most kids seem far more understanding than parents give them credit for, I think. For years, I held on to the burning embers of resentment for what my parents did to me. But my mindset began to change when I understood an important fact. It's up to me to move forward. Once I took total ownership of my life, I began to lead from the front, setting new standards of self-care, self-love, and self-generosity. I'm pleased to report that after counselling and massive improvements in my overall nutrition, health, and well-being, many of my childhood memories have returned. I've also learned to take full advantage of the powerful medium that is the internet to effectively be the change I want to see, with some extra help. I highly recommend it. We live in an age where a few keystrokes can change a life, your life more importantly. And our parents, depending on their age, didn't have the same access to information that we have now. Once you're empowered with new knowledge, you'll set yourself on your own journey of healing and leadership, so that when you become responsible for other human beings, as a parent or guardian, mentor or whatever, you'll have the tools to impart positivity and functional behaviour to the next generation. Personally, I've been able to repair the majority of my life with information gleaned off the internet. I even found a recipe for chicken liver pate that'll make your spine tingle. Love it or hate it, it's a powerful resource, and one for which I'm eternally grateful. The Beatle John Lennon died in 1980, but many years later, his words still resonate with me. There are two basic motivating forces, fear and love. When we are afraid, we pull back from life. When we are in love, we open to all that life has to offer with passion, excitement, and acceptance. We need to learn to love ourselves first in all our glory and imperfections. If we cannot love ourselves, we cannot fully open to our ability to love others or our potential to create. Evolution and all hopes for a better world rest in the fearlessness and open-hearted vision of people who embrace life. Laban's Random Lessons. Parents, for the most part, are just grown-up children. They are a direct reflection of their own upbringing and environment. We need to be gentler in our judgment sometimes. The best suggestion I can offer to children of dysfunctional parents: focus on self-development with the goal of breaking the cycle of dysfunction and trauma in yourself. Forgiving ourselves and then everyone else is such an effective pathway that it should be added to every school's curriculum immediately. If you ever experience a trigger for any repressed memory, be kind to yourself and seek the guidance of a trained professional. A good professional can empower you with much needed confidence and allow a far smoother healing journey than trying to figure out on your own. It might take you a few attempts, but keep trying until you find someone that you really connect with. You'll know when you do, and if it's all too hard, you're probably heading in the wrong direction. And as Nelson Mandela once said, one of the things I learned when I was negotiating, that until I changed myself, I could not change others. Thank you for listening and dealing with the DHL delivery guy. There's been no one come for days, and then he comes in the middle of a very important reading of Bet On You, available on Amazon in every country that Amazon exists, which, little known fun fact, I think it's about 24, 25 countries around the world, maybe more. Both of my parents haven't read the book. I think my mum can't get past that chapter, and I think it invoked quite a lot of shame and an idea that they were maybe had a better idea. They had a better thought that they were better parents in their own mind than reality. And it's very important to acknowledge both my mum and dad, who I love dearly and have forgiven. And I'm very grateful for the many wonderful attributes that I got from my mum and dad. And I think it's really interesting. Like, why wouldn't you read your son's book? Like, it's really funny, and you get to learn about your kid, or maybe you don't want to learn. I don't know. Any parents out there that have got kids that are authors, I'm keen to hear your thoughts. Something that's really important to me and might resonate with you. We have an event. When I say we, my very good friend and business partner Tony Schmaltz have an event called Upgrade Your Life. Upgrade Your Life Tour, in fact, because it'll be the first of what we expect to be many of these events. September 17th and 18th in Panama City Beach in Florida, not to be confused with Panama City, Panama, is one of my friends in Australia. It was like, why would you have it all the way over there? We've got a lineup of the most amazing speakers, but the main headliners that you need to be aware of at this point are Les Brown, Tom Ziegler, Kevin Sorbo, and Waldo Wallman, and a whole bunch of other people. And you can get tickets at upgradeyourlifetour.com, spelt the way it sounds, upgradeyourlifetour.com. I'll throw some links in each one of these social media feeds as well. Looks like LinkedIn might be having a few challenges, but that's okay. I'm going to sign off. If you're not having a great day, I'd encourage you to do so. And if you are, well, keep up the good work, would you?